to our second story, which is about Bernie Sanders. Now, Bernie Sanders is here trying to give a warning to the Democratic Party about what they're focusing on versus what they should be focusing on. Again, do I think that they will necessarily listen to Bernie Sanders? Probably not. But let's go through this clip here. There's parts here where I want to chime in, but let's go through this and I want you to hear what he has to say.
Senator Sanders is with us. Thanks so much for joining us. Tell us why you think that's a mistake.
Well, Jake, first of all, I happen to believe that the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe versus Wade is an absolute outrage. I think Democrats have got to fight to make sure that it is women who control their own bodies, not the government. So I think this is a very important issue, but I don't believe it can be the only issue. At a time when we have an economy in which the wealthiest people, the billionaire class, are getting much, much richer, while working people are struggling to put food on the table, it goes without saying that we have got to focus on the economy and demand that we have a government that works for all of us and not just wealthy campaign contributors.
John, to Emily Transition Vlog, you said exactly what I was about to say. Hit that like button, guys. That helps me out with the algorithm there. But you said exactly what I was about to say. It's too late. It's too late. It is October 17th. November's just around the corner. Now, Bernie Sanders said that he doesn't think abortion should be the only issue. Now, watch. Some people are going to come and they're going to say, oh, there goes Bernie Sanders being misogynistic, not caring about women's issues. No. But it's too late. Where was this months ago? Do you see what I mean? You wait until October and say, now we need to be focusing on the economy and working class people's struggles and needs and what working class people need in this country. Where have you been all this time? Where have all of them been all this time? The Democratic Party made a big mistake. The moment that overrule was announced and they sent out text messages to people, and I got one of them, text messages to people asking to donate because they just overturned Roe v. Wade. Why do I need to donate to you? Because of what the Supreme Court did. Why do I need to donate to you when you had decades to codify Roe v. Wade into law and you sat on it? People point to Barack Obama didn't have the votes. Ro Khanna said that when I interviewed him, right? But Ro Khanna also told you that they should have abolished the filibuster. So why didn't they do that? So the fact that they actually had the nerve to ask the American people for money during a time where we were struggling with inflation and the gas prices were still astronomically high, they had the nerve to ask us for money. You should have been giving us money. They should have been giving us money to help us with the inflation. But they're giving money to another country instead. People losing their jobs, people can't pay their rent, and they had the nerve to ask us to give money to them. It makes no sense. None. They even gave it a name. They said, we're calling it Rovember. The fuck? You got a hashtag going now? You trying to make money off of this? This is going to be our card in our back pocket. This is how we're going to win in the midterms because we failed with everything else over the past year and a half. We failed with everything else, but we got them with the Roe issue. So they're going to come out and support us. It's not necessarily looking that way. But this is what they wanted. They thought this is their golden ticket to bring the voters to come out, and decided we'll just pass this Inflation Reduction Act to make it look like we're doing something for inflation, which we went over that bill, which does not address inflation at all. Just steadily trying to fool the American people as if people can't look at their own bank accounts and see what's really happening. Big mistake. Huge.
And the irony here is Republicans say, they talk about the economy. Really, not one of them is going to vote to raise the minimum wage to a living wage. Not one of them is going to vote for legislation that makes it easier for workers to join unions. Not one of them is going to vote to do what every other major country on earth does and guarantee health care for all people, nor will they vote to raise taxes on billionaires at a time when the richest people in this country, in some cases, pay nothing in federal income tax. So I happen to think.
So listen to what Bernie Sanders said, because he's basically calling himself out here when he says not one of them. Listen to this.
We've got to focus on the economy and demand that we have a government that works for all of us and not just wealthy campaign contributors. And the irony here is Republicans say, they talk about the economy. Really, not one of them is going to vote to raise the minimum wage to a living wage.
Pause. Now he's talking about Republicans. Not one of them is going to vote to raise the living wage to the minimum wage to a living wage. He's right. But what about those 8 Democrats that voted against the $15 minimum wage increase, Bernie Sanders? See, this is the thing with people like Bernie and the other progressives in DC. It's easy for them to call out the Republicans not supporting progressive policies. When are they going to call out the Democrats not supporting progressive policies? And I don't mean just Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. They were not the only ones who were against that $15 minimum wage increase. They were not the only ones. There were 8 Democrats in the Senate who voted against it. A one independent who caucuses with Democrats. So we're going to call him a Democrat too. So this is Bernie Sanders. See what I said? It's easy to be left when you criticizing the right. But he did this to himself here. He pointed out that specific example to raise the minimum wage to a living wage. And you need to call this out too, Bernie. You sit right in the Senate. You need to call out those 8 senators who voted against the $15 minimum wage. But he's not going to do that. This is that team politics that we were just talking about from the previous story. He's not going to call out the Democrats who are also against it too, because that's his team. There's more.
Not one of them is going to vote for legislation that makes it easier for workers to join unions. Not one of them is going to vote to do what every other major country on earth does and guarantee health care for all people.
Guarantee health care for all people. Again, he's talking about the Republicans. Not one of them is going to vote to guarantee health care for all people. Didn't Ro Khanna say that they don't even have the votes in the House to pass Medicare for all, Bernie? Democrats control the House. The majority of the Democrats don't want it either, Bernie Sanders. You going to call that out? Nancy Pelosi doesn't want Medicare for all. And she's the speaker. This is where they go wrong. You know how you say this speech, how you correct this? You say, look, when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, we're looking at the Republicans, we're looking at the Democrats. Neither one of these parties right now wants to support this, and this. Bernie Sanders isn't doing that. Bernie Sanders is sitting right here right now. And I feel like he's really gaslighting the people, because he's sitting here and he's making you think that it's just the Republicans that don't want to do it. And he's not calling out the fact that the Democrats, the majority of them there, don't want to do it either. That is not cool. That is wrong. And if you're new and you don't know, I heavily supported Bernie Sanders. Heavily. And I donated a lot of money to Bernie Sanders. And when Bernie Sanders told you to vote for Joe Biden before he even suspended his campaign, that right there let me know exactly who Bernie Sanders really was. And I wish I would have caught on earlier. Some people caught on 2016. What does that tell you? This is Bernie Sanders playing team politics. I can't believe it. He's not even going to mention that these Democrats also don't want to support Medicare for all. If they did, and the commentator here, I would interrupt and say, well, if that's the case, Bernie Sanders, do you mean the Democrats would support Medicare for all? Because if that's the case, why hasn't your bill been brought to the floor for a vote? Because you don't have the votes because they don't support it. If it was that necessary, if Bernie feels that way, why didn't Bernie Sanders urge and encourage the squad members to force the vote for Medicare for all, which is a DSA policy? Why didn't he ask them to do that? Let's think about this, guys. We know they like Bernie. We know they'll listen to someone like Bernie. Why didn't Bernie Sanders tell the squad members to go ahead and force the vote?
Will they vote to raise taxes on billionaires at a time when the richest people in this country, in some cases, pay nothing in federal income tax?
And some of the Democrats who are there in the House and in the Senate will not vote to raise taxes on the billionaires either. These issues that he is talking about are problems on both sides, not just with the Republican Party. If it wasn't a problem on both sides, we would have passed it already.
I happen to think the Republican line is phony, and Democrats have got to respond.
So might the concern be among Democratic strategists that, hey, Democrats are the party in power, underlying the economic problems that you just underlined, might be underlying the failure of the Democratic Party, which controls the House, the Senate, and the White House, to deliver?
Well, that's simply just not accurate. The truth is that inflation, which is a very serious problem in our country, is a global problem.
No. He's talking about the failure of the Democratic Party to deliver.
Among Democratic strategists that, hey, Democrats are the party in power, underlying the economic problems that you just underlined, might be underlying the failure of the Democratic Party, which controls the House, the Senate, and the White House, to deliver.
Well, that's simply just not accurate.
It is accurate. All of those policies, those issues that Bernie Sanders brought up, has not been, none of them, not one has been delivered by the Democratic Party. Not one of the policies that Bernie Sanders mentioned to you. Not one. So yes, you have failed to deliver. You are the party in power. Now, this is Bernie Sanders running cover for the Democratic Party. You see how this goes? Oh, my goodness.
Truth is that inflation, which is a very serious problem in our country, is a global problem.
What does inflation have to do with the Democrats in the House and the Senate passing those policies that you just mentioned? Not one. Not one.
In the UK and in Europe, in many cases, it is worse than it is here in the United States. So to blame Joe Biden for it just doesn't make any sense at all.
So now he's going to do the global comparison. In the UK and other countries, the inflation is worse than it is here in the United States. Newsflash, in the UK, everybody have health care. In some of these other countries like Germany, they have free college. They have health care. They have the things that we're fighting to get. You see the problem? So yes, their inflation may be higher, but they have free health care, Bernie. We have inflation and we don't have free health care. And we have to pay for the schooling. And we still have a federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. And you have these employees that are being exploited by their employers, which is why you have so many people going on strikes. We can't even give everybody a decent living in the United States. So when people try to make that comparison, and I've seen other people do the same thing, they want to do the global comparison. Well, so-and-so has more inflation than we do. They also have things we don't have that we got to pay out of pocket for to go along with the inflation.
What the inflation crisis is about is broken supply chains. It's the war in Ukraine. And I'll tell you, Jake, what else it's about. It's about the incredible level of corporate greed that we are now seeing. People go to the gas pumps. Prices are very high, lower than they were a while ago, but too high. Understand that the oil companies, the big oil companies, ExxonMobil and the others, are making record-breaking profits. You can't afford prescription drugs? Well, understand that the pharmaceutical industry is making huge profits. Food.
And understand also, Bernie, that both parties accept money and donations from Big Pharma. This is why we don't have Medicare for all.
Industry, huge profits. So in my view, what's been going on is a lot of these large corporations are taking advantage of the terrible war in the Ukraine, taking advantage of the breaks in supply chain, and just raising prices to an outrageous level. And I think we've got to go after them on that.
And since he brought that up, and I wasn't going to be the one to bring that up, but since he brought that up in reference to Russia and Ukraine, when we want to talk about money and we want to talk about the American people struggling to pay for things, but we've seen billions of dollars go out the door to Ukraine. Notice Bernie Sanders doesn't say that, though, because he voted for it. You see it? That make you look kind of bad. Because then if you say that, yeah, you know, we shouldn't have all these billions of dollars going to Ukraine, even though I voted for it. We had the money. We still have the money to help people right here in the United States. But the money is going to other people who don't live here. And Bernie Sanders don't want to mention that because then that makes the Democratic Party and the Biden administration look bad.
What do you make of the argument from Democratic former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, who last year was sounding the alarm about inflation, saying that the government had been pumping too much money into the economy, both during the early days of COVID, starting with Trump and throughout the first year of the Biden administration? He was warning that inflation was going to be really bad, and now he's saying, essentially, I told you so.
Where is this money that they're talking about, ladies and gentlemen? Where is this money? They're talking about those 2 measly stimulus checks that some people didn't even get. Not to mention there were checks sent to dead people. Where's all this money that they're talking about that went into? Who did the money go to? If the money went to us, we wouldn't still be struggling, right?
Yeah, well, I guess he told the government of the UK that, and he told governments all over the world, inflation is a global problem. In many countries, it is worse than it is in the United States. Now, Larry Summers, I know Larry, and does a good job representing his Wall Street interests. But I think it is time we had a government that stood up for working families. And
how long he gonna say this? Bernie Sanders is still making the same argument that he made under the Trump administration today, under the Biden administration. So you have the Democratic Party that is now in control, that's in the White House, but Bernie Sanders is still making the same statements. But yet he claims so much has improved under Joe Biden. He said Joe Biden was doing a good job during that interview that he had with Crystal Ball. If that's true, Bernie, why you still have the same complaints and the same statement that you had when Trump was in office? How much has really changed? How long is he going to make this speech? It's 2022. Bernie Sanders been saying this for how many years now?
questions that we should be asking ourselves is, why do we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs when the pharmaceutical industry makes huge profits? Why are we the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people? Why do you have half of the elderly people in this country earning less than $25,000 a year, and you got Republicans out there who want to cut Social Security, they want to cut Medicare, they want to cut Medicaid so they can give more tax breaks to their billionaire friends?
Yeah. Is anyone going to tell Bernie Sanders that Joe Biden also wanted to cut Social Security? He knows this, right? Why is he pretending like it's only Republicans that want to do that? It's not.
Those are the kinds of issues that we need to be discussing, in my view.
Right, but that's my point. I mean, the issues that you feel passionately about, paid family and medical leave, college affordability, home health care, housing child care assistance, you tried to get all those things done. They got cut from the Democratic proposal. I mean, there are Democrats out there, progressives, who are big Bernie Sanders supporters, who are saying, why should we vote for Democrats? Bernie, you've been fighting a good fight, but all that stuff got stripped from the legislation that passed the House and Senate.
And good question.
Oh, Jake, I didn't know you knew me like that. Jake said we got some progressives out there that are asking, like, all these things were a part of the legislation and it got cut. Why should we support Democrats? Why doesn't Bernie Sanders have that conversation with those people, by the way? I don't really see him going on independent media like that either. I say that about the squad, but let's be real.
Go ahead.
All right, Jake, that is an excellent question. And let me give you the simple answer. The simple answer is, with President Biden's strong support, we presented a piece of legislation called Build Back Better, which in many ways would have done more for the working class and the middle class of this country than any legislation passed in the last 50 or 60 years. It was transformative. We had zero Republican support, not one Republican who believed that we should deal with child care, that we should deal with health care, that we should deal with education, not one Republican supporting it. Unfortunately, in a Senate that is 50-50, 50 Republicans, 50 people in the Democratic caucus, there were two corporate Democrats who chose not to support what the president and I and the vast majority of the caucus wanted. That's the reality. We had 48 votes. We couldn't get 50. My hope is that we will
If you look at Jake's face, hold
elect
on.
two more Democrats.
Look at the look on Jake Tapper's face. He's like, I know he does not believe I am buying this. I know he does not believe I am falling for this BS. Now, here goes Bernie into his famous line. Here we go.
Education, not one Republican supporting it. Unfortunately, in a Senate that is 50-50, 50 Republicans, 50 people in the Democratic caucus, there were two corporate Democrats who chose not to support what the president and I and the vast majority of the caucus wanted. That's the reality. We had 48 votes. We couldn't get 50. My hope is that we will elect two more Democrats, so we'll have 52 in the Senate, so that we can begin to address the long neglected needs of working families. It is just not acceptable that we have.
My hope is to elect two more Democrats, so we'll have 52 in the Senate. Who are the Democrats that are supposed to be coming into the Senate that's going to approve of all these progressive policies? I don't see any. Who are these progressive Democrats who are supposed to be coming in that's going to approve of all of that? Who? And let's say they do. Who's going to be the rotating villain then? You think it's just going to be Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin? I don't believe it's just them, by the way. Who's going to say no then? It'll be someone else. Watch. Then they'll be like, well, we need to get two more Democrats. The point that Jake Tapper, and I can't believe I'm agreeing with him for once. The point that Jake Tapper is trying to make is that the party is not delivering. It did not deliver on those things, regardless if the Republicans agree with it or not. And Bernie brings up the two corporate Democrats, Sinema and Manchin, but they are a part of that party. And they're not the only corporate Democrats in the Senate. In fact, most of the Democrats in the Senate are corporate. So they're still a part of the party, Bernie Sanders. And that is what Jake Tapper is saying. The party. Now let's go back and hear this because he has not answered his question. Let's go back to here.
Essentially, I told you so.
Yeah, well, I guess he told the government of the UK that, and he told governments all over the world. Inflation is a global.
Not that part. Hold on. Here we go.
Not to guarantee health care to all people. Why do you have half of the elderly people in this country earning less than $25,000 a year, and you got Republicans out so they can give more tax breaks to their billionaire friends? Those are the kinds of issues that we need to be discussing, in my view.
Right, but that's my point. I mean, the issues that you feel passionately about, paid family and medical leave, college affordability, home health care, housing child care assistance, you tried to get all those things done. They got cut from the Democratic proposal. I mean, there are Democrats out there, progressives, who are big Bernie Sanders supporters, who are saying, why should we vote for Democrats? Bernie, you've been fighting a good fight, but all that stuff got stripped from the legislation.
The question is, why should we vote for Democrats? For the people who are the progressives?
That passed the House and Senate.
Jake, and good question.
Go ahead.
All right, Jake, that is an excellent question. And let me give you the simple answer. The simple answer is, with President Biden's strong support, we presented a piece of legislation called Build Back Better, which in many ways would have done more for the working class and the middle class of this country than any legislation passed in the last 50 or 60 years. It was transformative. We had zero Republican support, not one Republican who believed that we should deal with child care, that we should deal with health care, that we should deal with education, not one Republican supporting it. Unfortunately, in a Senate that is 50-50, 50 Republicans, 50 people in the Democratic caucus, there were two corporate Democrats who chose not to support what the president and I and the vast majority of the caucus wanted. That's the reality. We had 48 votes. We couldn't get 50. My hope is that we will elect two more Democrats, so we'll have 52 in the Senate, so that we can begin to address the long neglected needs of working families. It is just not acceptable that we have more income and wealth inequality today than we've ever had in this country. It's not acceptable that you got 500,000 people who are homeless in America, rents are soaring, and we're not building the kind of low and moderate income housing that we need. We need an agenda that speaks to the needs of working families and not wealthy campaign contributors.
So I left this up here from the Quantum Alchemist because, again, the question was, why should we vote for the party? I mean, Bernie goes into this whole history lesson about what happened and what they did. We're not asking you about that. Jake didn't ask you nothing about the past. He didn't ask you about how it works, like structurally. People know that Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin did not support it. We know that. The question was, why should we vote for the party? And based on what Bernie Sanders just said, that to me was not a convincing statement for people to vote for the party. I don't know. If he was trying to sell the party, he didn't sell it.
Senator Bernie Sanders, always good to hear your views. Please come back. We love having you on. Thank you so much.
I'm actually surprised. Like when I first saw this clip, again, shout out to Case Study because he sits through all of this stuff. But when I first saw this clip, I was actually surprised that Jake Tapper asked that question. I was surprised that came from CNN. Because I just told you, like, if Bernie Sanders was trying to make his case, I don't feel like he made his case. Because those policies that he mentioned that he said the Republicans didn't support, the Democrats didn't support it either. That's the problem. So you didn't make your case. I'm going to go to some of the comments here. But the warning that he had about making Roe number one and not focusing on the economy, that's for real. Send the text. I agree, Sabby, but the Democrats don't care about winning. They just become lobbyists, speakers, etc. This is true. They want to fundraise. Thank you for this super chat, Duncan. Bernie is talking like he's thinking about a 2024 run. Haven't heard this rhetoric from him in a while. Don't fall for it, y'all. He has mentioned that as a possibility. It's laughable to me. Jay says the reason Bernie is worse than a sellout is because he sold us out when we had the numbers to do something. Oh. Jay, that is a really good point. We really did. We really did. Lawrence goes, Bernie is more afraid of the Dems than he is of the Republicans. Boom. Rick, Bernie and progressives equal careerist. Thank you so much for the super chat. Yesim. It truly breaks my heart to see Bernie like this, but you are correct, Sabrina. It's crazy, right? Like, I guess I never would have thought that Bernie would have gone this way. 3 years ago, I never would have thought this, but fool me once, fool me twice. And thank you for this super chat, Duncan. Not Jake pushing back on Bernie from a more left perspective. Ugh, what is happening? Wake me up. I know, it was really weird. When I first saw this, I was like, what? Oh, Bernie. I don't know.